Welcome to Get a Word In, a podcast about content marketing. I'm your host, Adam Walker. I'm passionate about sharing stories and knowledge through content, especially in the form of podcasting. In fact, I co-founded Edgewise.media, a podcast-first marketing content agency. On this show, I interview content marketers at some of the top companies in the world and discover what's working for them, what isn't, and most importantly, what's next. So stay tuned and get ready for some great content about content marketing. Joining me on the show today is Todd Unger. Todd is the Chief Experience Officer and Senior Vice President of Marketing and Member Experience at American Medical Association. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Man, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about this. This is going to be fantastic, but just because I know you've got a lot of experience, and I know you do a daily podcast. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. To start off with, is there anything you want to fill in about your bio for our listeners so they kind of know who you are and what you're about?
So I've been the Chief Experience Officer at the AMA for 6 years now, but a long-time marketing and digital person. In my career, kind of three phases. Started out in just regular old marketing at Procter & Gamble and Leo Burnett, big ad agency. And then I jumped to, believe it or not, America Online. That was my first place that I took a digital product management role and left there as a GM of their local operation before heading into kind of the New York media world, where I ran a bunch of different websites, including in the enthusiast space, which we're going to talk about there. And then the last kind of phase before I landed here, I worked for the Daily Racing Forum, which is in horse racing. It might sound kind of strange, but a place where content marketing was so important and connected to commerce and taught me a lot. That made me a perfect candidate for a very different enthusiast audience, physicians.
Yeah, I love that. You know, I get to interview a lot of physicians on one of my other podcasts, so I love the medical space and talking to physicians. But man, thank you for joining us on the show today. It's going to be fun. So let's dive in. Question one, related to content marketing, what's working right now?
So our kind of straight up content marketing operation is still running strong. And I would say, you know, there are a number of different kind of buckets that I would put, you know, under that banner, so to speak. One is just kind of very SEO-driven content creation that is really focused on answering the questions that people type into Google.
Yeah, that's great.
You can imagine what life has been like for us here over the past few years and through the pandemic, and we've gotten pretty good at figuring out through our analysis what people are looking for, and we build to order, so to speak, and that has been a real boon to traffic there. And then second, I kind of alluded to it a little bit. You know, I come from an enthusiast space. When I worked at the division of Time Inc., it had 19 different enthusiast properties, from surfing to skateboarding to golf, yachting, you name it. Then I moved into kind of horse racing, very different area. It was all about people who were very into betting on horse races and needed content to do that, and both kind of technical, kind of data-oriented, but also service journalism, how to get better, and of course, everything you would want to know about horses and from professionals. So, you know, transition to where we are right now here at the AMA. It's a different kind of enthusiast audience, but it's still the same kind of service journalism that we've got going on here. Everybody wants to be better. Everybody wants to know kind of the latest information, you know, whether it's research or information about equity and how to. And so we're building out those kind of same little kind of packages that I was building out 10 years ago. What doctors wish patients knew about X. Started with one article, and then now we're at 100. You know, that's that. I would say just, you know, also just in terms of kind of tricks of the trade, so to speak, you know, we do support through paid platform on social, basically the things that we think, you know, that we're focused on. Can't try to, you know, do everything with that. So we're using certain social platforms for certain kinds of content. And we have, you know, a pretty well-identified audience that we're able to correspond with. This is a very targeted operation. We're talking to physicians, residents, students, and of course then broader folks in the healthcare space, including folks in the Capitol. So, I'm not trying to be the New York Times here. It is a very focused operation. And everything we create, you mentioned the podcast, everything we create, we just squeeze every last bit of juice out of that. And so, that particular thing starts with a video that we do. It gets turned into a podcast. It gets turned into a transcript. It gets turned into an article. It gets turned into short things, and they go on our social platforms and across YouTube, you name it. So create once and basically publish everywhere. That's the formula.
I love that. I do the same thing, except I start with a podcast first and then build everything out from that. But I find that's just the easiest way to create content. So I love that. It's fantastic. Okay. Man, that's a lot of stuff that's working. What's not working right now? What are you dialing down? What are you shying away from?
Well, I'd say just in general, content marketing has its limits based on what people are looking for. And so, yes, do I wish that people would search more the term prior authorization so we could tell the story of how much we're working on that for them? It has its limits in terms of kind of the organic side of this. And so that's where you end up having to push out and pay for things to go out. I would say the thing that we're most challenged from in a certain standpoint is the same thing that everybody's challenged with right now, which is like we received, huge amounts for us of traffic based on how well we served the audiences during the pandemic. And there's just nothing that you can do to index and show growth against some of those things. And so, when I talk with our team, I'm like, that's just not the job. I don't want people to be demotivated by the fact that we're just not going to see numbers like that again. Although I would have said our traffic would have dropped precipitously. We're not seeing that. But we're not seeing those kinds of month-to-month growth levels that we saw. And we're certainly faring so much better, when you look at what other sites out there are experiencing right now in terms of drop-offs, we're not seeing that. But the kind of growth that we got used to those 3 years, fortunately, what we did was we learned a lot from that process, and we put in place a lot of fundamental changes. So we're not going to go back, but we're probably not going to see those kind of skyrocketing levels again.
Yeah, honestly, had not really thought of that at all related to you all, but I can see why that would be the case. That makes a lot of sense.
I was going to say the one thing that we're working on right now is we do have a big campaign in the marketplace called AMA's Recovery Plan for America's Physicians, and it's together kind of 5 big topic areas, things like Medicare payment reform and prior authorization and physician wellness, scope of practice, telemedicine, these kinds of things that are at the top of the list on physicians' minds right now. That's where we're putting our content marketing efforts. And so when I'm looking at the dashboard month to month with the team, yes, maybe total traffic, we're not seeing that same level of growth in some of the pandemic type content, but what we're seeing is the growth in the things that are most meaningful and connected to our membership operation.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. Okay. So related to content marketing channels, what channels are you seeing traction on? And I got to ask, have you gone into Threads yet? I got to ask. So
prepared for that question. The answer is yes. It's very, listen, if you're in this business, there are a lot of new channels have come out, and even in 5 years. And you don't just turn around and start operating a new channel. It takes people, it takes focus. Everything has a different flavor and kind of reason for being. And we, proceed cautiously into each space because of the way, what this organization stands for. But, when I arrived here 6 years ago, I would say one of the myths we had to get through was that physicians weren't on Facebook. Wrong. They were on Facebook, by and large part, and having very, very deep discussions, both personal and professional, with their colleagues, and a lot of them in private groups that we don't participate in, obviously, but they're people. They are sharing stuff about their families and having just interactions like everybody else. And so I would say when we started, we were very, very surprised at the success we saw on telling our story through Facebook. That was probably our primary channel. And as time has progressed, I would say just like anything, there are kind of waves. As we started to see maybe that faltering, there are changes in algorithms, changes in stuff like that. We saw Twitter emerge as a very, very strong channel for us. And then has recently, not surprisingly, softened a little bit. I would say Instagram has become very, very important for us. Again, we had to build that channel from scratch for us. And so for certain audiences is very effective in communicating. YouTube, again, different audience out there, not necessarily that targeted, both a repository for nearly 700 videos that we've done in the past 3 years, but not the best and most targeted vehicle. I'd say LinkedIn has gone from the CPAs that we would see on a channel like that were like astronomical in the beginning, and now have come down dramatically. And we see that as a very, very positive place for us to tell our story right now. Threads is new. And we're experimenting with that right now. I'd say TikTok is the other place, especially for younger audiences. Let's say medical students, very, very important audience for us to be able to tell our story in a very different way. But again, it takes focus and a very different approach than what we would do on those other channels.
Yeah. I love what you said. I think I wrote it down. You said everything has a different flavor and reason for being. Like that may be the best description of the need to vary your approach to each channel that I've heard. Like everything's got a different flavor, and you're totally right. That's a great way to phrase it. So I love that. I can go on a T-shirt. So
just a little trademark.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll trademark. I'll put your name under it. It'll be great. We can sell it to 5 whole people that love content marketing. So no, that was great. I love that. So then last question related to focus. Like you're obviously running a large operation. You've got a lot of moving parts. For those of us that maybe don't have as many moving parts or as much of a team, and we need to kind of focus in on 1 or 2 things, if you had to focus on 1 or 2 things yourself over the next 6 months, what would you double down on right now?
So right now, I think the thing that's on everybody's mind is how to use AI. We're using it primarily right now to figure out how do we scale through things like ChatGPT, scale content production. And so we do require a lot of expertise. There can be a 0% chance of hallucinations in our content. And so we will not replace humans, but there are certain kinds of content that we produce toward, let's say, keyword production that we can scale pretty dramatically and cut the time in half or more that we're doing. And so kind of take a first pass at that, things that are very fact-based, and then run that through our editorial process to produce those things. And so I think if you're not experimenting with that right now, you should be, not with an eye toward necessarily replacing people, but with an eye toward like multiplying your content like dramatically.
Yeah, I feel like with AI, like it's a great way to fast track ideation in particular, even getting just a rough first draft just to get some ideas out there and then go, oh, I can take that and let's scrap that entire second paragraph. That's worthless. And then it can just help you move faster. So as a content creator, you can get a lot more created as long as you're the last one doing the creative process. I think that's the key. Yeah.
And I would say we've always had an important emphasis and continue to on subscription and lead generation type content generation. Email is still just so critical to what we do, and the other kinds of like background subscriptions that people are opting into in terms of whatever page they land on. Would you like to see another of the said such franchise that we produce right now? We're trying to create as many of those subscriptions as we can and focus our email operation to be even more targeted so we can increase interaction engagement rates and lessen anything that might happen on the unsubscription side. to make sure that what we are out there doing is, continues to be valuable. Again, back to the enthusiast space. People who are enthusiasts have an unlimited appetite for the things that they're interested in and zero appetite for the things that they don't. And so your job is to remain that thing that people are interested in and not to go outside of what those lines are and start talking about something they don't care about, because then you will literally or figuratively be unsubscribed.
Man, I love that. That's a great thought, a great quote right there. That's another t-shirt.
It's going in my book. Look for that next spring, the 10-second customer journey, but that's one of my important lessons of my lifetime. And then I just think, what we'll call modern link building through content syndication and different audiences out there, whether it's folks that serve it kind of as an ambassador role here, aggregators, journalists, you name it. We want to be in every feed out there that we can, on a targeted basis. Again, I'm not trying to be everything to everybody. This is a very focused site with a very particular point of view. We want to, be out there in those places where that matters.
I love that. I love that. Well, Todd, if you'll indulge me for a minute, I'm going to try to recap our conversation. I've been taking notes as we're talking. So let me see if I can give us a summary of it, and then you can just correct me or add to it or whatever at the end, then we'll log out. So let's make sure I was listening well. For what's working related to content marketing, you said the content marketing is running strong. SEO-driven content creation, answering questions that people type into Google is really effective. You've got an enthusiast base, so you're doing service journalism. And skipping down to a quote you just gave, which I just love, you said, enthusiasts have an unlimited appetite for what they're interested in and zero for things they are not interested in, which is an amazing insight. You said certain social platforms require certain types of content, so there's nuance, and that you take one piece of content and turn it into all kinds. I think you said video to podcast to transcript to article to shorts to YouTube to everything else from there, if I made my notes correctly. For what isn't working, you said, content marketing has its limits and kind of cited that sometimes people might not necessarily know what to search for on the organic side to understand what they need to understand. And that's where some paid might have to come in to supplement some of that. And you also mentioned that the growth that you sustained during COVID, has slowed. It's still good growth, but still it's slowed down because those numbers are just going to be different because people aren't searching quite as much for medical things right now as they were then. For channels, you said you're on Threads, so props to you for that. You're, in the first week, the first 100 million users. That's awesome.
I'm not sure that's very distinctive anymore.
I mean, it's not, but
you're in the
works.
first 100 million.
You're in the first 100 million. I mean, listen, later on it'll be a whole billion, so whatever. But first 100 million. Did mention Twitter's softened a bit, which I totally agree with. Instagram's important. You mentioned that YouTube is a great place to kind of repo your 100+ videos, which I can totally see.
700.
Yeah,
and a lot more.
I mistyped that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I remember you saying 700 and I mistyped that. I apologize. 700+. And that LinkedIn has been a great place to tell your story. And for focus, if you had to double down and just focus on one thing, you said how to use AI, using it to scale things in content production. You said there can be a 0% chance of hallucinations in your content, which I've talked about AI a lot on this show. You're the first person that's mentioned hallucinations in AI, which I love.
Really,
the
that's
fact
the
that
best word associated with generative AI. Are you kidding me?
It's the most important thing. Like great example. One of my good friends, he asked Bard. He's like, "Hey, what was the score to the Braves game last night?" And Bard said, "Oh, the score was this." And Bard was correct about that. And then it went on to say, "And tomorrow they play this team, this team, this team, and this team." And then my friend looked at the schedule, and none of that was correct. Like it was all completely fabricated. It's like, well, you can trust it somewhat if you fact check it, I guess, And then you mentioned that email is critical. And then again, I'll quote it one last time because it's in your book and it's going to be amazing. Enthusiasts have an unlimited appetite for what they're interested in and zero appetite for things they are not. So did I miss anything in the summary or anything you want to add to that?
No, just say, the only Facebook we talked about in there, still hanging in there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I would just say our ability to tell the story of what this organization is doing for physicians, students, patients. Our social channels remain just so very important to being able to do that. And I feel really lucky that we have the content team that we have here. They're just awesome.
That's fantastic. I love it. Well, it sounds like you're making amazing content. I'm going to go subscribe to your podcast right now.
You can find it on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to yours.
The name of the podcast is?
It's now the AMA Update.
Okay.
which doesn't work very well apparently in voice commands because it comes out as AMA update. But it's American Medical Association update, AMA update. You find it on Spotify. That's where I listen to it. YouTube, you name it.
Okay. It's a daily podcast. That's amazing. Well, Todd, thanks so much, man. I'm going to have you back, and we're going to talk even more about that daily podcast soon.
I'll look forward to it. All right.
Man.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Get a Word In, brought to you by Edgewise.media, a podcast-first marketing content agency. To learn more about Edgewise, visit www.edgewise.media. I'm your host, Adam Walker. To connect with me, check out my blog at adamjwalker.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe now so you don't miss our next great conversation about content marketing.